If you asked Dr. Marcus Pemberton what he thought about when he woke up each morning on Kepler 442 billion, he'd probably tell you something profound about humanity's destiny among the stars and the noble pursuit of knowledge. The truth was, he mostly thought about how his back hurt from sleeping on a camp cot and whether the instant coffee would taste less like motor oil today. But Pemberton wasn't about to admit that to anyone, especially not to Captain Rita Vasquez, who somehow managed to look like she'd stepped out of a military recruitment poster even after 3 months of digging through alien dirt. She had this annoying habit of being competent at everything while making it look effortless, which really got under Pemberton's perfectly groomed academic skin. "Another thrilling day of brushing dust off rocks, Doctor?" Vasquez said, checking her tablet while walking past Pemberton's excavation site. She didn't even look up, which somehow made the comment twice as irritating. Pemberton adjusted his safari hat with wounded dignity. "These are not mere rocks, Captain. These ruins represent the first tangible evidence of pre-human civilization in this sector. We are literally rewriting the history of blah blah cosmic significance. Yeah. Professor Nils Kowalski bounced over to them like an overeager puppy, tablet in one hand and some kind of scanning device in the other. "Marcus, you've got to see these readings from Grid 7. The crystalline formations are showing unprecedented energy signatures that correlate with Zephyrian theories about ancient power matrices." Vasquez rolled her eyes. "English, Professor. Some of us didn't spend 20 years reading alien instruction manuals." "He means they found something that glows," said a small voice from behind a supply crate. Everyone turned to look at Tommy Chen, who was sitting cross-legged in the dirt, methodically working his way through what appeared to be his third granola bar of the morning. At 8 years old, Tommy had mastered the art of looking both completely innocent and thoroughly unimpressed at the same time. Tommy, Pemberton sighed. "We've discussed this. The adults are trying to work." "I know," Tommy said, unwrapping another granola bar. "That's why I'm staying over here." Tommy was, technically speaking, not supposed to be on Kepler 442 billion at all. He was supposed to be back on Earth with his grandmother while his mother, Dr. Linda Chen, participated in humanity's most important archaeological expedition. But then Dr. Chen had the poor timing to get herself killed in a shuttle accident 3 weeks into the mission, leaving Tommy with nowhere to go except a military transport back to Earth or staying with the expedition until they could arrange proper care. Vasquez had voted for the transport. Pemberton had voted for the transport. Even Kowalski, who liked everyone, had voted for the transport. But Tommy had quietly mentioned that his mom had been working on something important, and maybe he could help. And somehow everyone had agreed to let an 8-year-old hang around a potentially dangerous alien archaeological site. It was, Pemberton reflected, probably not their finest moment of academic judgment. "The energy readings are definitely increasing," Kowalski continued, completely oblivious to the family drama. "If we continue excavation at the current rate, we should reach the primary structure within 48 hours. Vasquez frowned at her own readings. "Define primary structure, Professor." "Well, based on the scans, it appears to be some kind of massive crystalline matrix embedded approximately 12 meters below the surface. Roughly 30 meters in diameter, with what appear to be internal chambers and possibly some kind of technological components." Pemberton felt his pulse quicken. This was it. This was the discovery that would make his career, cement his place in history, possibly get him a decent office back at the university instead of that broom closet they called his research space. "Gentlemen," he said, straightening his shoulders and adopting his most serious academic pose, "we may be on the verge of humanity's greatest archaeological discovery." Or, Tommy said, finishing his granola bar, "we might just be digging up someone's old garbage disposal." Nobody bothered to respond to that, because 12 meters below them, something that had been sleeping for approximately 10,000 years decided it was time to wake up. The ground started humming. Not shaking, not rumbling, just humming, like someone had turned on the world's largest tuning fork and buried it underground. Everyone stopped talking and looked around with the universal expression of people who weren't entirely sure if they should be concerned yet. "Is that normal?" Vasquez asked, though her hand was already moving toward her sidearm. "Define normal," Kowalski said, staring at his tablet as numbers started cascading across the screen faster than he could read them. The humming got louder. Then the ground around their excavation site began to glow with a soft, pulsing blue light that definitely hadn't been there 5 minutes ago. "Okay," Vasquez said, drawing her weapon and backing toward the transport shuttle. "Now would be a good time for someone to tell me this is part of the plan." Pemberton was frantically trying to process what was happening while maintaining his dignity as the expedition leader. "This is clearly some kind of automated response to our excavation activities. The structure below is obviously more sophisticated than we initially." His explanation was cut short by the ground directly under their feet suddenly becoming transparent. Not glass transparent, not clear transparent. Just not there anymore, like reality had decided that particular patch of dirt was optional. Below them they could see the thing they'd been digging toward for 3 months, and it was magnificent and terrifying and absolutely, definitely not human technology. "Oh," Tommy said, looking down through the transparent ground with mild interest. "That's actually pretty cool." The machine, because there was really no other word for. The massive crystalline structure now visible beneath their feet was beautiful in the way that alien technology probably shouldn't be. It looked organic and artificial at the same time, like someone had grown a computer out of starlight and mathematics. It was also, very clearly, turning itself on. Streams of light began flowing through the crystal matrix in patterns too complex to follow, and the humming evolved into something that might have been music if music were written by beings who thought in 11 dimensions. Holographic displays materialized in the air around them, showing star charts, mathematical equations, and symbols that hurt to look at directly. "Fascinating," Pemberton breathed, momentarily forgetting to be terrified. The level of technological sophistication required to create stable holographic projections in open atmosphere suggests a civilization far more advanced than anything in our historical record. "It's trying to communicate," Kowalski said, practically vibrating with excitement. "Look at these patterns. Sequential mathematics, stellar cartography, symbolic representation. This is first contact, people. This is the moment humanity has been waiting for." Vasquez was less impressed. "What I see is a potentially hostile alien artifact that just made our ground disappear and is now shooting laser light shows at us. I'm calling this in." She stepped back toward the communications array, but the machine apparently had other ideas. The holographic displays shifted, and suddenly every piece of electronic equipment in their camp went dead. No radios, no tablets, no scanners. Even Tommy's handheld game system made a sad little beeping sound and shut itself off. "Well," Tommy said, looking at his dead game system, "that's rude." Pemberton cleared his throat and stepped forward, drawing himself up to his full height and adopting what he hoped was an appropriately dignified stance for humanity's first official contact with an alien intelligence. "I am Dr. Marcus Pemberton of the Human Colonial Archaeological Survey," he announced in his most formal tone. "On behalf of humanity, I greet you and express our desire for peaceful communication and mutual understanding." The machine continued its light show without any noticeable change. Kowalski bounced forward eagerly. "Perhaps it requires a mathematical approach. With the universal language." He began holding up fingers, counting in binary, then switched to drawing geometric shapes in the air. Nothing. "Try music," Pemberton suggested. "Mathematical relationships expressed through harmonic frequencies." Kowalski began humming what he apparently thought was a mathematically significant tune. It sounded like a funeral dirge written by robots. Still nothing. "India." Vasquez rolled her eyes and stepped forward. "Maybe it responds to authority." She raised her voice to military command level. "Unknown vessel, you are in the presence of representatives of the human species. Please acknowledge and state your intentions. The machine kept cycling through the same displays, completely ignoring all of them. For the next 3 hours, they tried everything. Pemberton delivered what he later claimed was a historically significant speech about humanity's achievements and peaceful intentions. Kowalski attempted interpretive dance based on something called universal kinetic communication theory, that he'd apparently learned from a research paper published by someone with too much time on their hands. Vasquez tried everything from hand signals to shouting commands in 5 different languages. The machine maintained its patterns with the patience of something that had been waiting for 10,000 years and wasn't particularly bothered by waiting a bit longer. Tommy spent most of this time sitting on a supply crate, watching the adults make fools of themselves while eating his way through the emergency snack rations. Occasionally, he'd offer commentary. Maybe it doesn't like British accents, he suggested after Pemberton's 15th attempt at formal greetings. Maybe it's deaf, he said when Kowalski started singing mathematical constants. Maybe you're all trying too hard, he said when Vasquez began attempting some kind of military semaphore routine. Nobody was listening to him. They were too busy being important and making history and completely failing to notice that their approach might be fundamentally flawed. By the 4th hour, Pemberton's dignity was hanging by a thread, Kowalski was hoarse from humming, and Vasquez was seriously considering whether shooting the machine might produce a more productive response. "This is ridiculous," she finally said, holstering her sidearm. "We're highly trained professionals, and we're being ignored by a glorified alien jukebox." "Perhaps," Pemberton said with wounded academic pride, "the intelligence behind this technology operates on principles beyond our current understanding. We may need to develop entirely new approaches to interspecies communication." Or, Kowalski added desperately, "we could try interpretive sculpture. I read a paper about 3-dimensional symbolic representation that might." "Oh, for crying out loud," Tommy interrupted, hopping down from his supply crate and walking directly toward the machine. "You guys are being ridiculous." "Tommy, don't," Vasquez started, but Tommy was already standing right next to the holographic displays, looking up at the ancient alien intelligence with the complete lack of fear that only 8-year-olds could manage. "Hey," he said to the machine, like he was talking to a neighbor over the back fence, "you're pretty loud. What do you want?" The machine stopped. Everything stopped. The cycling holograms froze mid-pattern. The musical humming cut off like someone had pulled a plug. Even the soft blue glow seemed to pause, as if the entire ancient intelligence was holding its breath. Pemberton's mouth fell open. Kowalski dropped his tablet. Vasquez's hand moved automatically toward her weapon, then stopped because what exactly was she going to shoot? For approximately 10 seconds, the archaeological site on Kepler 442 billion was completely silent, except for the sound of 3 adults trying to process what had just happened. Then the machine spoke. Not through the holographic displays, not through mathematical sequences or harmonic frequencies or interpretive light patterns. It spoke in perfectly clear, but slightly condescending English with what sounded like the cosmic equivalent of a customer service representative who'd been dealing with difficult clients all day. Finally, the machine said, "Someone with sense." Tommy nodded like ancient alien artifacts talked to him every day. "Cool. So what's your deal?" Pemberton made a sound that might have been a whimper. Kowalski sat down hard in the dirt. Vasquez just stared because in 15 years of military service, this wasn't covered in any manual she'd ever read. "My deal," the machine said with what was clearly amusement, "is that I've been waiting centuries for your species to develop enough intelligence to have a proper conversation. Imagine my disappointment when the first humans to find me spend 4 hours trying to communicate through amateur theater and tone-deaf singing." "Yeah," Tommy said, glancing back at the adults, "they do that a lot, always making simple stuff complicated. So what are you exactly?" "I am what you might call the machine paused, apparently searching for appropriate terminology, a cosmic welcome wagon. My creators left me here to evaluate species that reach sufficient development to find this system. Evaluate for what? Membership in the galactic community. Your species has reached the point where you need to be assessed for civilization status. Pemberton finally found his voice. Excuse me, but as the senior representative of humanity present, I believe I should be. No, the machine said flatly. No. I can't communicate with you. Your mind has been too thoroughly corrupted by academic pretension and bureaucratic nonsense. I can only interface with individuals whose thought processes haven't been damaged by taking themselves too seriously. Tommy grinned. So basically you only talk to kids? Essentially, yes. Adults of your species seem to lose the ability to think clearly sometime around their 20th year. It's quite tragic, actually. Vasquez stepped forward, clearly struggling with being dismissed by a machine. Now, wait just a minute. I'm the military representative here, and I have authority over. Authority, the machine said with cosmic patience, is exactly the problem. You've all become so concerned with who's in charge and how important you are that you've forgotten how to ask sensible questions. Tommy looked back at the adults, who were all standing there like they'd been slapped with a fish. So what kind of question should I ask? Well, the machine said, and Tommy could practically hear it settling in for a good conversation. You might start with wondering why a galactic civilization would leave evaluation systems lying around on random planets. Okay, why would you do that? Because most species, when they develop space travel, immediately start behaving like cosmic teenagers. They think they know everything, they ignore established rules, and they cause problems for everyone else. We learned a long time ago that it's better to test species before they become everyone else's problem. Kowalski couldn't help himself, but surely the test must involve demonstrations of technological advancement, cultural sophistication, mathematical understanding. Professor, the machine interrupted, you just spent 3 hours humming at me. Exactly how sophisticated did that seem? Tommy laughed. Burn. In the test. The machine continued, addressing Tommy exclusively. Is much simpler than your academic friends think. We're not interested in how clever you are or how many weapons you've invented or how many planets you've colonized. We're interested in whether you've retained enough common sense to be decent neighbors. That makes sense, Tommy said. So are we? That, the machine said, is what we're here to find out. But first, let me ask you something. What do you call me? I can't keep referring to myself as the machine. It seems rude. Tommy considered this seriously. You're kind of like a big alien computer thing, right? With all the glowing and the talking? That's reasonably accurate. How about Gizmo? Mo. Gizmo, the machine repeated thoughtfully. I like it. Much better than my actual designation, which roughly translates to Bureaucratic Assessment Protocol 77 Alpha subsection 12-9. Yeah, Tommy agreed. Gizmo's definitely better. Pemberton was making strangled noises. This cannot be how first contact is supposed to work. There are protocols, procedures, diplomatic frameworks. Dr. Pemberton, Gizmo said with infinite patience, you are exactly the reason I can only talk to children. So Gizmo, Tommy said, settling cross-legged on the ground like he was getting comfortable for story time. What's this galactic community thing like? Complicated, Gizmo replied. Imagine the United Nations, but with species that evolved from sentient crystals, beings made of pure energy, and creatures that think in colors you don't have names for. Now imagine trying to get them all to agree on anything. Sounds like a mess. It is. That's why we have the evaluation system. Every species goes through a phase where they think they're the most important thing in the universe. Most of them never get over it. Pemberton couldn't contain himself any longer. But surely humanity has demonstrated our worthiness through our achievements. Our art, our literature, our scientific discoveries, our exploration of space. Gizmo's response was the cosmic equivalent of a patronizing pat on the head. Dr. Pemberton, in the last galactic census, we recorded over 4 million spacefaring civilizations. Do you know what makes yours special? Our unique cultural heritage, our innovative technology, our indomitable spirit of exploration? Your children, Gizmo said simply. Everyone stared at Tommy, who looked around with the expression of someone who'd just been told he'd won a contest he didn't remember entering. Most species, Gizmo continued, develop intelligence in a linear fashion. They start simple, get more complex, and eventually become so sophisticated that they lose the ability to see simple solutions to simple problems. They get caught up in their own importance and forget how to think clearly. Vasquez frowned. And humans are different how? Human children retain the ability to think logically even while human adults are tying themselves in philosophical knots. Most species lose this capacity entirely as they mature. You seem to maintain it longer than anyone else we've encountered. Kowalski was frantically taking notes on a piece of paper, since his tablet was still dead. Fascinating. This suggests that human cognitive development follows a non-standard pattern that... Professor, Gizmo interrupted gently, you're doing it again. Doing what? Making something simple sound complicated because you think complicated means important. Tommy nodded knowingly. He does that a lot. The evaluation system is quite straightforward, Gizmo explained. We present scenarios that test common sense, basic decency, and the ability to not take yourself too seriously. Most species fail because their representatives can't answer simple questions without turning them into academic dissertations. What kind of questions? Tommy asked. Well, for instance, if you discovered a planet with primitive life forms, what would you do? Pemberton immediately straightened. Well, obviously the first step would be to establish a comprehensive study protocol, followed by careful observation to determine the level of development, but then perhaps limited contact following strict non-interference guidelines based on established xenobiological frameworks. Wrong, Gizmo said cheerfully. Wrong? But that's the accepted academic approach too. Tommy, what would you do? Tommy shrugged. Don't mess with their stuff? Like if you found some kids building a fort, you wouldn't knock it down just because you could build a better one. Correct. Pemberton looked like someone had just told him that gravity was optional. But that's completely unscientific. There are procedures, methodologies, peer review processes. All of which, Gizmo pointed out patiently, assume that your way of doing things is automatically better than theirs. The correct answer is to leave them alone unless they specifically ask for help. This is ridiculous, Vasquez interjected. You're basing humanity's cosmic future on the opinions of an 8-year-old. Captain, Gizmo said with what might have been sympathy, your species has been observed for approximately 50 years. Do you know what the consensus opinion is about humanity? I'm almost afraid to ask. You're the most entertainingly neurotic species anyone's ever encountered. You worry constantly about whether you're good enough, smart enough, important enough. You tie yourselves in knots trying to prove your worth when the answer is usually something obvious that your children figured out years ago. Tommy found this hilarious. That's totally true. Adults are always making stuff way harder than it needs to be. The galactic community, Gizmo continued, is full of species who've forgotten how to laugh at themselves. Most civilizations become so focused on being sophisticated that they lose the ability to recognize when they're being silly. Humanity appears to be different. How so? Kowalski asked, though he was clearly afraid of the answer. You've maintained your sense of humor. Even when you're trying to be serious and important, There's usually someone around to point out when you're being ridiculous. Usually a child. Pemberton was beginning to look like someone who'd just realized his entire career might be based on a misunderstanding. Are you saying that all of our academic achievements, our scientific progress, our cultural development, none of that matters? It matters, Gizmo said kindly, but it's not what makes you special. Every species develops technology and culture and philosophy. What makes humans interesting is that you've retained the ability to step back and laugh at yourselves when you get too caught up in your own importance. But surely, Vasquez said, there must be some kind of formal assessment, some way to measure a species' readiness for galactic citizenship. There is, Gizmo said. We call it the Tommy test. Everyone turned to look at Tommy, who was now lying on his back in the dirt, using his hands to make shadow puppets in the holographic light displays. The what now? Tommy asked without looking up from his shadow rabbit. The Tommy test, Gizmo explained with what was clearly cosmic amusement, is what we call the evaluation protocol when dealing with human representatives. It's named after the first human child we encountered during preliminary observations. There was another Tommy? Tommy asked, sitting up with interest. Tommy Rodriguez, age 9, encountered one of our scout probes in Earth's Pacific Ocean in 2019. When asked what humanity's greatest achievement was, he said pizza delivery because you can get hot food brought right to your house by just pushing buttons on your phone. And that's basically magic. Tommy nodded approvingly. That's a pretty good answer. The Galactic Council agreed. It demonstrated practical appreciation for technological innovation combined with a sense of wonder and acknowledgement that things people take for granted are actually quite remarkable. Pemberton was making increasingly distressed noises. But what about our space program? Our scientific discoveries? Our artistic achievements? Dr. Pemberton, Gizmo said with infinite patience, would you like to know what Tommy Rodriguez said when we asked him about human space exploration? I'm not sure I want to know. He said, oh yeah, we shot people at the moon because we were curious what it was like up there. That's pretty cool, I guess. That's it? Mitts? That's it. No grand speeches about human destiny among the stars. No philosophical dissertations about the drive to explore. Just simple acknowledgement that curiosity is a good reason to do interesting things. Vasquez was beginning to look like someone who'd spent years studying for a test only to discover the questions were completely different than expected. So the evaluation is based on simplicity? Clarity, Gizmo corrected. The ability to see situations clearly without getting tangled up in your own assumptions about how important you are. Okay, Tommy said, getting interested in the conversation again, so what's my test? Simple, Gizmo replied, and suddenly the air around them filled with new holographic displays. I'm going to present you with scenarios that the galactic community deals with regularly. You tell me how humanity would handle them. The first display showed what appeared to be a star system with multiple planets, some clearly inhabited. Scenario 1, your species discovers a solar system with 3 different civilizations, all at roughly medieval levels of development. They're not aware of each other's existence. What do you do? Tommy studied the display thoughtfully. Do they seem happy? Define happy. Like, are they doing okay? Not starving or fighting wars or anything? They appear to be thriving within their current technological limitations. Then don't mess with them, Tommy said immediately. If they're doing fine, why would you bother them? If they want to meet each other, they'll figure it out eventually. Behind him, Pemberton was making choking sounds. But the opportunities for cultural exchange, the scientific advancement that could result from contact, the expansion of knowledge. Dr. Pemberton, Gizmo said gently, why do you assume your intervention would improve their situation? Well, because we could offer them advanced technology, medical knowledge, scientific understanding. All of which, Tommy interrupted, they didn't ask for. That's like going into someone's house and rearranging their furniture because you think your way is better. Exactly, Gizmo said with approval. Next scenario. The display changed to show what appeared to be a massive space battle between two different types of ships. Scenario 2, two species are engaged in an interstellar war that threatens to destabilize an entire galactic sector. Both sides appeal to humanity for military assistance. Tommy frowned at the display. Why are they fighting? The official reason is a territorial dispute over mining rights to an asteroid belt. The actual reason appears to be that they've been fighting for so long that nobody remembers what they're fighting about. That's stupid. Yes, it is. Can we just not get involved? Vasquez stepped forward. Tommy, sometimes military intervention is necessary to prevent greater suffering. If we have the power to stop a destructive conflict. Captain, Tommy said, looking at her seriously, if two kids at school were fighting, would you solve it by bringing a bigger kid to beat them both up? That's not the same thing. Isn't it, though? Gizmo's approval was practically audible. What would you suggest, Tommy? Tell them they're being dumb and they should figure out how to share. And maybe don't give either of them more weapons until they learn to use their words. The Galactic Council's official policy, Gizmo said, is almost exactly that. The scenarios continued. Each one presented complex political, military, or diplomatic situations that could be resolved through either elaborate strategic intervention or simple common sense. Tommy consistently chose common sense. The adults consistently suggested complicated solutions that would have made everything worse. This is insane, Pemberton finally exploded. You're determining humanity's cosmic destiny based on the opinions of a child who thinks interstellar diplomacy should be settled like playground disputes. Dr. Pemberton, Gizmo said with what might have been sympathy, do you know why most galactic conflicts start? Territorial disputes? Resource competition? Ideological differences? Adults who think they're smarter than they actually are, making simple problems complicated. Tommy was sprawled on the ground again, apparently having gotten bored with cosmic responsibility. Are we almost done? Because I'm getting hungry, and I think there might be some cookies left in the shuttle. Actually, Gizmo said, we are almost done. Just one more question. The holographic displays shifted to show what appeared to be a peaceful planet with clearly advanced but environmentally integrated technology. Final scenario, humanity is invited to join the galactic community as a full member. What do you think your species should contribute? Pemberton immediately straightened, clearly seeing his chance to redeem humanity's intellectual reputation. Our scientific achievements, our cultural diversity, our innovative problem-solving capabilities, our artistic traditions, our philosophical frameworks. Tommy? Gizmo asked, ignoring Pemberton entirely. Tommy considered this seriously. Well, what do you guys need? Need? Mead? Yeah, like what problems does the galaxy have that we might be able to help with? That's actually a very good question. Most species immediately start talking about what they want to get out of membership. But that's backwards, Tommy said reasonably. If someone invites you to join their club, you should ask what you can do to help, not what you can get out of it. Gizmo was quiet for a long moment. When it finally spoke, there was something that might have been wonder in its voice. In 4,000 years of conducting these evaluations, you are the first representative to ask that question. Really? Mud? Really? And Tommy? Yeah? Congratulations. Humanity just passed its evaluation. The moment Gizmo announced that humanity had passed its cosmic citizenship test, Pemberton went through what could only be described as an academic identity crisis. We passed? He said, staring at Tommy like the 8-year-old had just solved faster than light travel using crayons. We're accepted into the galactic community? Based on On playground logic? It's not playground logic, Gizmo said patiently. It's common sense. Which, as it turns out, is the rarest quality in the galaxy. Kowalski was frantically scribbling notes on every piece of paper he could find. This changes everything we know about xenodiplomacy. The implications for interspecies relations are staggering. We need to completely revise our first contact protocols. Or, Tommy suggested, you could just try being nice to people. Vasquez had gone very quiet, which usually meant she was processing information that didn't fit into any of her existing frameworks. So what happens now? Do we get some kind of galactic welcome package? A handbook? Advanced technology? Well, Gizmo said, and the amusement in its voice was unmistakable, there is one small condition to humanity's membership. Everyone held their breath. There it was. The catch. The fine print. The cosmic bureaucracy that would probably require 17 different forms filled out in triplicate. All future diplomatic contact with the galactic community will need to go through Tommy. The silence that followed this announcement was so complete that you could have heard a pin drop in orbit. I'm sorry, Pemberton said slowly. Could you repeat that? Humanity's official galactic representative, Gizmo said cheerfully, will be Tommy Chen, age 8, of Earth. At least until your adult representatives learn to think clearly without tying themselves in philosophical knots. Tommy looked up from where he'd been building a small fort out of supply crates. Do I get a cool title, like Ambassador Tommy or something? How does Cosmic Liaison Specialist sound? Awesome. Do I get a badge? We'll work something out. Vasquez was staring at Tommy with the expression of someone trying to reconcile the idea that humanity's diplomatic future rested in the hands of someone who still believed that cooties were a legitimate concern. This has to be some kind of joke. I'm completely serious, Gizmo said. The galactic community has been watching humanity for decades. Your children consistently demonstrate better judgment than your adults. Tommy represents the best of human thinking, curiosity without arrogance, logic without pretension, and the ability to treat complex problems as if they might have simple solutions. But he's 8 years old, and therefore hasn't had time to convince himself that everything has to be complicated. Pemberton was having what appeared to be an existential crisis. My entire career, my research, my academic reputation will be perfectly fine, Gizmo assured him. The galaxy needs scholars and scientists and researchers. But for diplomatic purposes, we've learned that children make much better negotiators. They haven't developed the ability to lie to themselves about their own motives. Tommy had wandered over to the machine's crystalline structure and was examining the light patterns with interest. Hey Gizmo, can I ask you something? Of course. Do aliens have good snacks? Tommy, Gizmo said with what was clearly cosmic delight, you have no idea what you're in for. There's a species called the Melody who have perfected what can only be described as edible music. And the Crystallians have developed a form of ice cream that exists in 7 dimensions simultaneously. Cool. What about pizza? 47 different varieties, including one made by beings who don't actually eat food but create it as a form of artistic expression. This job might not be so bad after all. Gizmo began powering down its displays, the holographic projections fading one by one. I'll be in contact soon with the details of humanity's integration into the galactic community. In the meantime, I'm leaving Tommy a communication device disguised as something age-appropriate. A small object materialized in the air and dropped into Tommy's hands. It looked exactly like a handheld video game system, complete with colorful buttons and a small screen. For when the adults inevitably mess something up and need someone with common sense to fix it, Gizmo explained. Does it play games too? The best games in 17 different galaxies. Consider it a signing bonus. As the ancient machine prepared to return to whatever cosmic hibernation it had been enjoying for the past 10,000 years, Tommy asked the most important question of all. "So when do I get to meet some aliens?" "Soon," Gizmo promised. "Very soon." "Oh, and Tommy?" "Yeah?" "Meh?" "Try not to let the adults make this more complicated than it needs to be." Tommy grinned. "I'll do my best." As the light faded from the crystalline structure and the machine settled back into dormancy, the archaeological team began the long process of packing up their equipment and preparing to return to Earth with news that would change humanity forever. But for Tommy Chen, newly appointed Cosmic Liaison Specialist, the most important thing on his mind was whether alien pizza was really better than Earth pizza, and if interdimensional ice cream would give him a stomach ache. Behind him, there, three of humanity's most accomplished professionals struggled to process the fact that their species' greatest cosmic achievement had been raising kids who were too sensible to be impressed by their own importance. "You know," Vasquez said as they watched Tommy carefully pack his new alien game system along with his collection of granola bar wrappers, "we could do a lot worse for a galactic ambassador." "I suppose," Pemberton said with wounded academic pride, "common sense is a form of intelligence." "The most important form," Kowalski added thoughtfully, finally putting away his notes. "Maybe we've been overthinking things." Tommy looked up from his alien game system, which was already displaying what appeared to be a welcoming message in 17 different languages, including several that used colors instead of letters. "Adults always overthink things," he said matter-of-factly. "That's why kids have to fix stuff all the time." As they prepared to leave Kepler 442 billion behind, carrying with them the knowledge that humanity had just become a member of the galactic community through the diplomatic skills of a third grader, Vasquez couldn't help but smile. "So, Ambassador Tommy," she said, "what's your first official act going to be?" Tommy considered this seriously while shouldering his backpack. "Well, I guess I should probably ask the aliens if they want to be friends. And maybe see if they know any good jokes." Gizmo seemed pretty funny for a giant space computer. And as their shuttle lifted off from the surface of Kepler 442 billion, carrying humanity's newest and youngest diplomat back toward Earth, and a future none of them could have imagined, Tommy Chen was already planning his first intergalactic cultural exchange program. It would, naturally, involve pizza.